Bonjour à tous. Good morning, everyone. I'm happy to be joined today by Minister LeBlanc, as well as by Dr. Tam and Dr. Njoo. La campagne de vaccination.
The mass vaccination campaign continues. Every day, we are working tirelessly to get as many doses as possible, as quickly as possible. Last Friday, we announced that millions of doses of Pfizer's vaccine will arrive earlier than anticipated, including 1.5 million doses before the end of March. As a result of this news, we are increasing our total number of vaccines received against COVID-19 before the end of March to 8 million doses. I know it's a lot of numbers and calculations, but the important thing is this. Vaccination is accelerating significantly. An ever-increasing number of people are getting vaccinated, including a lot of parents and grandparents that you can't wait to see again, and frontline workers. And every day, more and more people are being protected.
Right now, across the country, we're getting vaccines to Canadians. We now have 4 vaccines approved by independent regulators in Canada, more than any other country. Again, you can count on the fact that any vaccine approved in Canada is both safe and effective. Last week, we received almost 1 million doses of COVID-19 vaccines. This week, we're getting another 1 million. And before the end of this month, we will have received a total of 8 million doses of COVID-19 vaccines. On the 500,000 AstraZeneca vaccine doses delivered from the Serum Institute last week, these shots are being distributed to provinces as we speak. More and more people are getting vaccinated every day. That means more grandparents, healthcare workers, and vulnerable people are now safer. Our top priority is to get you your shot as soon as possible. No one will be left behind. Just take Myrtle from Kanawake, Quebec. She's 90 years old and was the first elderly person living at home in Kanawake to receive a vaccine. For Myrtle and her family, getting her shot was a big moment because now she'll be able to tell her sons who call every Sunday that she is safer.
The last year has not been easy, but despite everything, it is important to remember that we have reasons to remain positive. For example, yesterday was the International Day for the Rights of the Women. It was a time to stop and celebrate the achievements of women in all their diversity here in Canada and around the world. Unfortunately, it was also a time to remember that the consequences of the pandemic have been more pronounced for women and girls. This crisis cannot be allowed to roll back all of the social and economic gains women have made over so many years. In order to rebuild better, economic recovery must be a win-win situation for everyone.
Yesterday, Deputy Prime Minister Freeland announced the creation of the Task Force on Women in the Economy. This 18-member task force, from CEOs and childcare advocates to labour representatives, economists and Indigenous leaders, will advise the government on continuing to advance gender equality in the wake of the pandemic. We need to rebuild an economy that's fair for everyone. So that's exactly what we're going to do. Of course, this is just one part of the equation. After all, it's almost impossible to get, let alone keep, a good job without a roof over your head. Everyone deserves a safe and affordable place to call home. Yesterday, the federal government partnered with the government of British Columbia to announce a $517 million housing benefit investment over 10 years. This is part of our $2 billion commitment to the Canada Housing Benefit to support families right across the country. For more than 25,000 households in BC, the new Canada-British Columbia Housing Benefit will provide financial assistance to marginalized people with low incomes to help with monthly rent. On average, this could mean around $400 in support each month in rent. This program is designed to get right to people who need it most. That's why the benefit will go directly to households through nonprofit housing providers through BC Housing. Investments like this are real steps forward to make sure that everyone has a safe place to call home. I want to thank Ministers Ahmed Hussein and Joyce Murray, Member of Parliament Terry Beach, and their counterparts in BC for all their important work on this issue. Jeudi cette semaine,
On Thursday this week, the 11th of March, it will be 1 year since COVID-19 was officially declared a global pandemic by the WHO. In a short time, our lives have changed. What seemed normal the day before was going to become less and less normal in the weeks and months that followed. This week, you've been making sacrifices for a year. To all Canadians who make efforts big and small, I would like to say thank you. I know it's not easy. This is the kind of crisis that happens only once in a century. We will get through it by being united and by continuing to work together. We've come a long way since last year, and there is still a long way to go. But we're going to end up defeating COVID-19.
naming March 11th, 2021 as a National Day of Observance to honor everyone we lost to this terrible virus and to recognize the impact this global pandemic has had on all our lives. Around the world, more than 2.5 million people have died because of COVID-19. 22,000 of them were our fellow Canadians. They have been taken from us, but they will not be forgotten. Each one was special. Each one was loved. They were grandparents, friends, parents, brothers, sisters, and colleagues. There are no words for the pain of losing someone you love. As a country, we remember all those we lost and we mourn with families and friends. To everyone who is grieving, we're thinking of you and we're there for you. On Thursday, I invite all Canadians to join together to honor the memory of those we have lost and to thank all those who continue to make incredible sacrifices to fight this pandemic. Together, we will beat this virus. Merci. Je cède maintenant.
Thank you. I now give the floor to Dr. Tam and Dr. Njoo.
Bonjour à toutes et à tous.
Good morning.
Marks the 1-year anniversary of the World Health Organization's declaration of the COVID-19 global pandemic. As we update the latest numbers, let's not forget that the impacts have gone far beyond the numbers. During this long and difficult journey, we are continuing on together. To date, there have been 890,698 cases of COVID-19 in Canada, including 22,276 deaths. There are now over 30,300 active cases across the country. Over the past week, an average of over 2,900 new cases and 37 deaths were reported daily. During the same time period, over 2,080 people with COVID-19 were being treated in our hospitals each day, including almost 550 in critical care. This weekend, as I reflected on the week ahead, I felt a mix of emotions that I'm sure most of us are feeling in one form or another. First, in looking back at the year behind us, it is a time of solemn remembrance of the cherished lives we have lost. At the same time, it is clear that our work is not done. To honor the memories of those we have lost and appreciate the progress that our sacrifice has afforded us, it is time to pause to remember, gather our strength, and commit to our future by sustaining our efforts until the crisis phase of the COVID-19 pandemic is behind us. In remembrance, the Government of Canada has designated this Thursday, March the 11th, 2021, as a National Day of Observance to commemorate those who lost their lives and the significant impacts we have all endured because of COVID-19. As we reflect, it is also a time for great hope, given many important advancements. Not only have we all learned about the public health measures and individual precautions that work to reduce the spread of rapidly spreading respiratory diseases like COVID-19, but our efforts have held the force of infection at bay long enough to buy time for research on vaccines and treatments. It would be very easy to take for granted the incredible worldwide and population-wide effort that has brought us not one, but multiple safe and effective COVID-19 vaccines. In fact, the timeliness, safety, and effectiveness of these vaccines was not a given. And I would say it has in many ways exceeded the hopes we dared to have a year ago. We have all experienced loss, and I know we're all tired. But let's also recognize some of our achievements and the good things that we want to carry forward. We can have renewed faith in ourselves coming together during a crisis, sticking it out longer than any of us might have guessed we could do, and doing it with enduring kindness. Though there have been stumbles, we have adapted and we have endured, and I know we have what it takes to see things through. Lest I leave you without a public health reminder, as we continue to accelerate vaccinations, having the fewest interactions with the fewest number of people for the shortest time at the greatest distance possible, and wearing the best fitting mask will continue to serve us well. Thank you.
Bonjour à toutes et à tous.
Good morning. This week marks the one-year anniversary of the World Health Organization's declaration of the COVID-19 global pandemic. As we update the latest numbers, let's not forget that the impacts have gone far beyond the numbers during this long and difficult journey we are continuing on together. To date, there have been 890,698 cases of COVID-19 in Canada, including 22,276 deaths. There are now over 30,300 active cases across the country. Over the past week, an average of over 2,900 new cases and 37 deaths were reported daily. During the same time period, over 2,080 people with COVID-19 were treated in our hospitals each day, including almost 550 in critical care. This weekend, as I reflected on the week ahead, we felt a mix of emotions that we are sure most of us are feeling in one form or another. First of all, in looking back at the year behind us, it is a time of solemn remembrance of the cherished lives we have lost. At the same time, it is clear that our work is not done. To honor the memories of those we have lost and to appreciate the progress that our sacrifice has afforded us, it is a time to pause, to remember, gather our strength, and commit to our future by sustaining our efforts until the crisis phase of the COVID-19 pandemic is behind us. In remembrance, the Government of Canada has designated this Thursday, the 11th of March 2021, as a National Day of Observance to commemorate those who lost their lives and the significant impacts we have all endured because of COVID-19. As we reflect, it is also a time for great hope. Hope given many important advancements. Not only have we all learned more about the public health measures and individual precautions that work to reduce the spread of rapidly spreading respiratory diseases such as COVID-19, but our efforts have held the force of infection at bay long enough to buy time for research on vaccines and treatments. It would be very easy to take for granted the incredible worldwide and population-wide effort that has brought us not one, but multiple safe and effective COVID-19 vaccines. In fact, the timeliness, safety, and effectiveness of these vaccines was not a given, and I would say it has in many ways exceeded the hopes we dared to have a year ago. We have all experienced loss, and I know we are all tired, but let's also recognize some of our achievements. And the good things that we want to carry forward. We can have renewed faith in ourselves coming together during a crisis, sticking it out longer than any of us might have guessed we could do, and doing it with enduring kindness. Though there have been stumbles, we have adapted and we have endured, and I know we have what it takes to see things through. Lest I leave you without a public health reminder, as we continue to accelerate vaccinations, having the fewest interactions with the fewest number of people for the shortest time at the greatest distance possible, and wearing the best fitting mask will all continue to serve as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Njoo. We'll now turn it over to questions for the media. We'll start on the phone and then come back to the room. Just as a reminder, the Prime Minister will be here for a number of questions, and then the doctors and Minister LeBlanc will be available as well. Operator?
Thank you. Merci. Première question, Raymond Filion, TVA. À vous. Merci.
Question. Good morning, Prime Minister. You've always strongly defended multiculturalism and diversity, so I'd like to know how you react to allegations of racism in amongst the royal family. I believe that in Canada, we've demonstrated that we have no tolerance for racism or systemic discrimination. My government and myself have recognized the existence of systemic racism, and we've made significant steps to fighting this racism in all of our institutions and all of our systems. I will not comment on the royal family, the British royal family, but here in Canada, we will continue to fight systemic racism.
We have been very clear as a government that we will always stand up against systemic racism and intolerance in all its forms. I have recognized, our government has recognized systemic discrimination and has moved forward significantly to fight against it as it exists in all our institutions and all our systems. We need to be vigilant, and we will continue that work. I won't comment on what's going on over in the UK, but I will continue to endeavor to fight against racism and intolerance every single day in Canada.
What do you say to the many people here in Canada for whom the time is ripe to rethink our ties with the monarchy, especially following these allegations of systemic racism? My priority is to fight against COVID-19. It is to rebuild our economy better than it was before, and our efforts as our government is aligned on that and on the coming, as quickly as possible, of vaccines. Constitutional dialogue can happen in some places, but my absolute priority right now is the health and safety of Canadians so that we can beat this pandemic.
Right now, my single most important priority is getting through this pandemic and rebuilding the economy. Everything we're doing every single day in terms of keeping Canadians safe, of getting vaccines here as quickly as possible and into as many Canadians' arms as we possibly can, is our singular focus, along with preparing the economy to come roaring back as quickly as possible. I can understand some people are looking for constitutional conversations. I'm not going to engage in those right now. I am focused on getting us through this pandemic.
Merci. Prochaine question, operator.
Thank you. Merci. Next question, Cormac McSweeney, City News. Line open.
Prime Minister, there are reports that the government will not be presenting a budget in March, that it will be later this spring. Can you confirm whether or not we will get a budget by the end of the month? And what is your government's justification for not presenting a fiscal plan this month, given the fact that we haven't had a budget since 2019?
We will be announcing the date of the upcoming budget in due course, but I can tell you that we are focused very much on getting us through this global pandemic that has been the challenge that we've faced for a full year now. We have put forward measures repeatedly, including fiscal updates and significant investments in Canadians, from families to workers to small businesses, and we will continue to do absolutely everything necessary to get us through this pandemic as long as it takes. That's the promise I made to Canadians, that we would have people's backs every step of the way, whether it's on income supports, whether it's on the housing benefits we've announced today, whether it's on getting them vaccinated as quickly as possible. We are working on the budget. It will be coming soon, but we will have an announcement to make in due course.
Follow up, Cormac?
The military has announced that we have a new Vice Chief of Defense Staff, Francis Allen, Lieutenant General Francis Allen, the first woman to hold that role. How important is it to have a woman in that role at this particular moment in time, given the misconduct allegations against people in the senior ranks of the military? And will the government set up an independent body to investigate accusations of sexual misconduct, racism, and discrimination?
I think from day one, this government has been very clear that appointing women to positions of leadership throughout the government, starting with a cabinet that is gender parity for the first time in Canada's history, to appointments throughout our government that demonstrate how important it is to get to gender parity. I am very pleased to see a strong woman in the vice chief position for the first time in Canada's history, and obviously the tasks of everyone in senior leadership in our military is to move forward on ending the challenges of harassment and discrimination in the military and in other systems, as well as ensuring that anyone who comes forward to share stories or allegations is given the support and resources that they need. D'abord, en tant que gouvernement.
First of all, as a government, we've always shown the importance of placing women in positions of power. It began with our equal cabinet, but also in our appointments throughout government over the past 5 years. Many women, racialized people, minorities have been elevated because diversity is essential for the good of our country. With regards to the armed forces, I expect all leaders to fight against bullying, harassment, and various types of aggression. Having a woman for the first time in that position will be very important to continue our fight in eliminating discrimination and bullying within our armed forces, and to make sure that we have the necessary resources to offer support to all those who have concerns.
Merci. Prochaine question. Operator.
Thank you. Merci. Prochaine question, Mélanie Marquis, La Presse, à vous.
Question. Good morning, Mr. Trudeau. The Bloc Québécois has asked you to make mandatory hotel quarantines for everyone, including people who arrive by land, because some people cheat. They fly to Burlington, for example, and then they simply just take a taxi or a bus across the border. What do you have to say to the Bloc? We have for 1 year nearly put some of the strictest measures for international travelers here in Canada in the world. We have 2 weeks of quarantine. That's been the case since the beginning. We don't accept non-essential travelers or residents to come to Canada. And that has been the case for a year now. For a number of months, we have implemented measures to test people before they come back to Canada, and now they can be tested when they do return. We are examining the effectiveness of all of our different measures, and indeed, there are different measures for people who arrive from the skies and those who arrive over land. We are confident that our best practice-based decisions and expert-based decisions are the right ones to keep Canadians safe.
Clairement.
Yes, a follow-up question. So, So would you say yes or no, and why? Answer: I think it is essential to ensure that the measures we implement are the right ones. With regards to people's health and safety, these measures must also be doable. They must be implementable. We are always open to suggestions to do more, and we will examine the Bloc's suggestions.
Prime Minister, it's the first time we've had a chance to ask you about the news we reported a couple of days ago that someone who wanted to provide some information about Admiral MacDonald was threatened. And so I'd like to hear you comment on that. And then following on that is, what steps have you or the government taken to give comfort and surety to those who may have some information about some of these investigations and are nervous about coming forward? Can you speak to that?
Thank you, David. It is absolutely unacceptable that anyone who would come forward to share allegations or preoccupations around incidents of harassment or assault in our military or anywhere else be faced with intimidation themselves or threats. That is something that I condemn in the strongest terms. Everyone needs to feel comfortable in being able to come forward with concerns or allegations, and there need to be the resources and supports there to make sure they are heard and that those allegations are followed up on, respecting the wish of those people who come forward. It is extremely important that anyone who works anywhere in Canada, particularly for government, particularly anyone who's chosen to serve in our armed forces, be supported and listened to. We will continue to move forward on measures to ensure that we are not only giving those supports to people who come forward, but also ensuring that we're putting in place independent mechanisms to put an end to these troubling allegations and this behavior once and for all. C'est absolument
It is wholly unacceptable that anyone with allegations of harassment or assault be themselves victim of bullying, intimidation, threats, or harassment. No one who shares that kind of accusation should be subject to that. I condemn these reports in the most strictest terms. We have to ensure that whomever comes forward is listened to, is supported with all measures required so that we may move forward with independent investigations, depending on the will of the people or the person who has made the allegations. We must respect survivors. That must be at the heart of everything we do. And of course, we will continue to move forward to offer better support to all those who have concerns to share, but also measures to put an end to this culture that allows or tolerates bullying and harassment within our institutions in Canada.
Oui, bonjour, Laurence Martin.
Laurence Martin, Radio Canada. Question. You've talked about independent inquiries. Will there be such an inquiry into these sexual harassment allegations in the army? If yes, why didn't you do it earlier? Because these allegations have been on the table for years. Answer. In many of our institutions, the Armed Forces, Correctional Services Canada, with a number of recent reports, the RCMP, with the Bastarache Commission, we have seen cultural problems of tolerance, of harassment and abuse, which is unacceptable anywhere in Canada. We will and we are examining various measures we can implement to ensure that, first of all, there is true and tangible support to those who come forward with complaints and allegations of harassment. But also, we have to implement measures to change our institutions' culture throughout the country. and throughout our workplaces we have made progress, but there is still work to do. Of course, we will examine all the various reports and recommendations that have been made, and we will act.
I think what we're seeing over the past days, weeks, and months is a really troubling pattern in Canada. Whether we talk about the news coming out of the Canadian Armed Forces, whether we talk about the Bastarache report into the RCMP, or even recent reports coming out of Correctional Services Canada, we see that our institutions in Canada are not doing a very good job either of preventing a culture that tolerates harassment, intimidation, and even assault, or puts forward measures to support anyone who comes forward with stories of harassment, intimidation, or assault. This needs to end. There have been, as has been pointed out, numerous reports and recommendations made on measures that can be put forward to do that. We have taken steps as a government in that direction, but there is more to do, and we will do more.
Question suivie, Monsieur Trudeau, parce que
A follow-up question. There have been allegations for years in amongst the armed forces, and so this request for an independent inquiry has existed for years. So why have you not acted? Looking at this from outside, it seems that you've waited for a scandal to act. Answer, au contraire. We have moved forward with a greater number of measures and a better structure to better meet allegations that have been set forward to transform our culture with Operation Honour, for example. What we are currently seeing is that changes that have been brought forward have not been enough and were not quick enough. We will do more.
Taken significant measures over the past number of years in Parliament with C65 around our armed forces with a number of recommendations. We've moved on from the Deschamps report. We're moving forward on measures within the RCMP, and we've moved forward on measures within Corrections Canada. But what is obvious is that those measures didn't go far enough and they haven't moved fast enough. And that is my commitment, that we will be moving faster and going further to make sure that anyone who serves their country or works for the government or ideally works anywhere in Canada has a safe workplace and recourse if they are unsafe.
Prime Minister Lee Berthiaume, Canadian Press. Parties left and right of yours are calling for more targeted supports for sectors that will likely be last to emerge from the pandemic. Why are you resistant to this idea?
We have, from the very beginning, delivered on our promise to Canadians that we would be there to support people as long as it took, as much as it took. That's something that we've demonstrated. Of all the money invested in helping Canadians get through this pandemic, 8 or 9 of every $10 has come from the federal government. We have been there. And these supports have been targeted to the most hard affected sectors. Airlines have received over $1.5 billion in supports. Tourism operators have received support through the wage subsidy, through the CEBA. There have been many, many different supports that have gone to the hardest affected sectors, and we've further extended those supports. We have announced supports in our fall economic statement, and we certainly hope that parties in the House, particularly the Conservative Party, will stop playing games, blocking and obstructing the passage of important legislation, from medical assistance in dying to measures to support families. We know it's important that our democracy continues to function, that we continue to have robust debate around all these measures, but even the NDP and the Bloc are now pointing out that the Conservatives are being obstructionist in the functioning of Parliament. We need everyone to work together to be able to continue to deliver the supports for Canadians that they so richly need in this difficult time, even as we approach what is hopefully the end of this pandemic with the arrival of mass vaccinations.
Prime Minister Tom Perry from CBC. I know you don't want to get involved in a constitutional debate. I know you don't want to comment on the royal family. But I would like to ask you, how do you reconcile your support for the monarchy with your stated desire to dismantle the legacy of colonialism in this country?
There are many institutions that we have in this country, including that big building right across the street from us, Parliament, that has and is built around a system of colonialism, of discrimination, of systemic racism in all of our institutions. But the answer, Tom, is not to suddenly toss out all the institutions and start over. The answer is to look very carefully at those systems and listen to Canadians who face discrimination every single day and whenever they interact with those institutions, to understand the barriers, the inequities and inequalities that exist within our institutions that need to be addressed, that many of us don't see because we don't live them. That's what fighting systemic discrimination is all about. Listening, learning, and improving and transforming our institutions. We have been open to that. We have been working on that from the very beginning. Obviously, I wish all the members of the royal family the very best, but my focus, as we've said, is getting through this pandemic. If people want to later talk about constitutional change and shifting our system of government, that's fine, and they can have those conversations. But right now, I'm not having those conversations. I'm focused on getting us through this pandemic and bringing our economy roaring back.
I believe that it is very important to understand that we live in a system with institutions that were built not for everyone, but only for the few. And over the years, yesterday we recognized that it was not even 100 years ago that women were given the right to vote. We still have a lot of work to do to eliminate discrimination and systemic racism in our institutions. But that doesn't mean that we simply have to cast all of these institutions aside and then start from scratch. What we have to do is take a good look at our existing systems to remove existing barriers and inequities. The way to do that is to listen, to really actively listen those for whom this system is unjust, those who suffer from personal and systemic discrimination, so that we can learn to do better. I wish the best to the royal family, but my priority right now is to transform Canada to be more fair, just, and equitable. Just a better Canada for everyone.
Gray with CTV News. On vaccines, Johnson & Johnson has told the EU that they'll be under stress to meet their second quarter targets for vaccine supply. Has the company told you there'll be delays in Canada? And can you give us at least a ballpark date on when we can expect our first Johnson & Johnson shot in Canada?
First of all, we are very pleased to be one of the very first countries to authorize the Johnson & Johnson vaccine. With the approval of Janssen, we're now one of the only countries in the world with 4 major effective vaccines approved for use in Canada. We have heard in many conversations with Johnson & Johnson that there are challenges around production of the Janssen vaccine, but we will continue to engage with them, and we look forward to receiving doses as soon as possible. And as soon as we get confirmation of doses being sent to Canada, we will let everyone know.
Thank you, and that concludes the time the Prime Minister has. The doctors and Minister LeBlanc will be available for questions in just a moment, and we'll start over on the phone once the Prime Minister leaves.